Yeah, yeah, yeah. Feelings so deep in my feelings. No, this ain't really like me. You control my anxiety. Feeling like I'm touching the ceiling. When I'm with you, I can't breathe. Boy, you do something to me.
Welcome back to the Coliseum of Fantasy Knowledge, part 2 of tonight's cast. We are hitting the NFC North. We are glad to be back. We're all in our feelings, all right? Just all in our feelings, because my team's on this docket, so I'm all in my feelings. We're going to cover a little bit about our draft kit for those of you watching the second time. Sorry, you just got to indulge it. But we talk about our draft kit that we had coming out. We had the second version come out, the updated. We've already got some feedback. Guys are really happy with it. We're going to be doing this throughout training camp because everything changes in the camps. Everything's going to happen. Everything's going to change. So we're going to constantly keep you updated on that. And we're also going to be doing we're going to try to do some little news podcasts, like just some short ones, kind of get you guys caught up, quippets. Then we're also going to be doing our premium podcast for those of you who have subscribed on our website, idpfantasyempire.com. We're going to be hitting you up with a premium podcast. We're going to start diving into the X's and O's of football. We're going to just talk about the 3-4 defense, why certain players are good there, why certain players aren't as good there. Because, again, you have these guys coming from colleges that play all these different types of defenses, and then they go to the NFL and they have to learn the one that they're drafted to. So we're going to talk about that. I think we're going to cover 3-4 first, and then after that we're going to do the 4-3. So, and then we'll kind of, base cover New England's crazy defense and try to explain it.
Yeah, and the Arizona Cardinals, we're going to see what they're doing.
We still have no idea what they're doing at this point.
So where do you want to start, Paul?
Well, let's start in Chicago.
All right, we'll start this podcast out like we always do with these divisional roundups. We've got Christian Jones, who led the team with 90 total tackles. Danny Trevathan with 89. Eddie Jackson was 73. Kyle Fuller was 69. Adrian Amos was 69. Akeem Hicks with 54. Nick Kwiatkowski with 49. Prince Amukamara with 48. Sam Acho with 45. Eddie Goldman with 44. Leonard Floyd with 34. Mitch Utenrine with 32. Jonathan Bullard, 26. Bryce Callahan, 25. Pernell McPhee, 21. Marcus Cooper Sr., 18. And who else is noteworthy?
Well, I just want to note that Christian is gone.
Christian Jones, he's in Detroit.
He's flipped over to the other side. I think most
a couple other guys. I saw. I think Mitch Utenrine, is he still there?
I think so. That one I'm not for sure on.
I think he's with Baltimore. All right, let's jump right into the defensive line. We've got Akeem Hicks, Roy Robertson Harris behind him. We expect Akeem Hicks to that spot, obviously.
Yeah, that's a guy who's just, if you can trade and get him, he's always been producing those numbers. So he's a solid number guy.
For you, where do you have him, defensive end wise?
I have him like a DN2.
Okay. I have him
solid
like
DN2.
DN2, 3, borderline. Eddie Goldman is going to be the nose tackle. John Jenkins, Bilal Nichols is behind them. Do you expect him to eat into the snaps of the nose tackle position?
I think this is Eddie Goldman's prove-it year. Again, this is I believe the last year of his contract. I love Eddie Goldman. I really wish he'd have gone to Green Bay when he got drafted out of Florida State. This guy is he's a big body dude, but he has athleticism. And I really like that about Eddie Goldman. Again, getting near the end of your rookie contract, you want to put forth the best foot. And they're also having a new D coordinator. So they're getting rid of that John Fox system that never works. And then they're bringing in a guy who was really one of the higher toted, I guess, or higher recruited defensive coordinators when the season ended and Black Monday, which is like my second favorite holiday, happened. I always love Black Monday. It's
What's
one of my favorite.
Do I? What's your favorite holiday?
Oh, Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I get that rice dish I get every year, so I'm super happy.
Where does Christmas rank?
It's down there somewhere. Yeah, I mean, they have Vic Fangio. That's the defense corner they have coming in. So there's a lot of these moving pieces. I do like Bilal Nichols. He was a guy who impressed us a lot in these extracurricular collegiate games that we covered on all of our premium podcasts when we talk about these guys and we break down their game footage. He was a guy who kind of played his way up.
Yep.
He started with the lowest game and just kind of moved. He started with the NFLPA game and then jumped in the East-West Shrine game. And he was a guy who kept sticking out. Again, Delaware's helmets and Michigan helmets are very similar. So there was part-time when I didn't really know who he was yet. And I was like, man, that kid from Michigan is not too bad. And then I looked at him, he's from Delaware. Never mind, my bad. But I like Bilal Nichols. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. But on this defensive line, again, I think Akeem Hicks is the guy on this end. Jonathan Bullard's really good, but he's not necessarily been like a fantasy stud. He's a guy who kind of just pudges away. I think he's picked up in our league at all. No. And we're a really deep league. So, I mean, that kind of is a telltale sign.
Yeah, we have 14 teams with 80 total people per team. So if he's not taken, he's not fantasy relevant.
Oh, yeah. We're like the wasteland, man. We go until we find someone that we can squeeze a little bit of gas out of, and that's what we do.
Yeah. Moving into the linebackers, we've got Aaron Lynch coming over from San Francisco. Looks like he's going to be playing that strong side linebacker role. Behind him, you've got Jonathan Anderson, Kylie Fitz, a guy that you were sort of high on in the pre-draft process.
Out of Utah.
I don't think he's really going to be pushing for snaps.
No, it just depends on how the Aaron Lynch experiment goes. This is an experiment year for him because he wasn't really utilized in San Francisco. I mean, he didn't have a ton of stuff there.
He was a starter, but he wasn't tackle relevant.
And I think what helps him in Chicago is that this is his former defensive coordinator. So I feel like this kind of helps him out. But, I mean, he's on, I think, a 1-year deal, I believe they signed him for. So, again, this is going to be a prove-it situation. We see guys do this all the time where they prove themselves and get signed for later contracts.
And then we've got Roquan Smith, a guy that I took number 2 overall in our Dynasty rookie draft. I have to mention that just because I think that I was going to trade my 3rd overall pick. I had it right after Roquan Smith. So I had to think about linebackers. Do I want him or Tremaine Edmonds? And I picked Roquan Smith just because of what we saw on tape and everything that we covered in our premium podcast. I think this guy's rangy. I think he's got the ability to produce numbers like Deion Jones and be in the top 10 his first season. Behind him, you've got Nick Kwiatkowski out of West Virginia, who has been highly productive fantasy-wise, not necessarily the best middle linebacker in the NFL, but he stepped in and made tackles, and he's fantasy relevant. Pick him up if Roquan does go down or Danny Trevathan. Danny Trevathan's the other inside linebacker. Behind him, you got John Timu. Not really a guy that I like rostering just because I can't count on him whenever I need to start him. He's one of those guys that I pick up in dire needs, but I never feel comfortable starting him. And if you don't feel comfortable starting a guy that's on your squad, why would you pick him up?
Exactly. All right. Well, I want to cover on this
Take Floyd.
Oh, you want me to do Floyd?
Yeah, he's your boy, man.
Yeah, that is true. All right, on that right outside linebacker spot, you got Leonard Floyd, former first-round pick out of Georgia, guy who I roster. He's a guy who I've been telling people, and it's so funny. I really hope that I'm proven right. You know, just the fact I've tried putting him in on trades, and people just don't value him at all. They don't see what I've seen from my tape, and I tell them, like, I'm not a guy who's going to try to send you garbage for something really good. Like, I'm going to send you someone like he's had potential. He's had injuries. That's the only thing that's been holding him back. But this guy is a great pass rusher. And for the Bears, they don't have a lot of pass rushers necessarily besides Leonard Floyd when he's healthy. If he's healthy, he's the best pass rusher on this team up there with Akeem Hicks. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't see any difference. And he's looking good. I mean, I watched part of the Bears minicamp today, and I thought he was looking good out there. Again, it's just got to sustain that non-injury. If he can sustain that, I think he's going to be a guy who can get you some sack value this season, especially with, a defense that we haven't seen much pass rush from.
What week did we lose him last year? Week 1?
Yeah, we lost him for, I think he missed the last 5 games last year. But when he was in besides that, he was scoring about 11.83 a game. So he's able to produce good numbers.
And also, if you want to know our scoring system, go to our website. It's under the scoring drop-down tab.
Mm-hmm. Behind Leonard Floyd is Sam Achu. Just an awesome name. He's coming over from Arizona. And behind him is Joel Mbongwe. It's a really hard name to say. Hey, he's from Western Kentucky. He's another guy who I think might be better suited for an inside linebacker spot somewhere down the line, maybe backing up at Danny Trevathan. I feel like his body type fits that more than necessarily a pass rusher. But for what I know, if Aaron Lynch goes down and Kylie Fitz and him and Joel may be battling for a spot to maybe get on the field. It's just going to depend. I don't know how much stock I want to put in Aaron Lynch. That's the one guy on this linebacking core that I'm like, well, what's going to happen if?
My thing is Aaron Lynch is one of those guys that you don't want to roster because they're not fantasy relevant, but he is one of those guys that's going to be on the field 80 or 70 to 80% of the snaps. He's probably going to be the guy that comes off in nickel packages. So I'm really not impressed with Aaron Lynch as an IDP player, but as an actual football player, he's about right below average, So rely on him because the guys behind him, they're going to need to develop Fitz and Joel.
I know I had it. Igubane, I think is how it's pronounced.
Aaron Lynch has shown that he could play that strong side linebacking role in San Francisco, just not at an elite caliber.
Yeah.
Defensive backs, we've got Prince Mukamara. Behind him, Bryce Callahan. Bryce Callahan was actually one of those guys that I was attracted to last season just because he was highly productive whenever he got a chance to start. Made a lot of tackles. Adrian Amos is going to be the starting safety. Behind him is Deion Bush. Right next to him, you got Eddie Jackson and DeAndre Hall and Nick Orr behind that. As a starting corner on the other side, you got Kyle Fuller, who's stepped up his game quite a bit. I believe he was one of the top PFF cornerbacks last season, and really had a turnaround from the year prior.
Yeah. And I sent you a text today, and I was talking about targets. Adoree Jackson was the number 1 overall targeted guy last year, and Kyle Fuller was number 2. So this is a guy who sees the ball thrown his way quite a bit. He was also a guy who the Bears had to pay or they were going to lose him. It was one of those situations, and it was actually Green Bay who pushed him into getting him signed. Right. Again, Kyle Fuller, I don't know if it's just he gets targeted because Prince Mukamara plays well on the other side, but I mean, there's still fantasy value there because he has had that targets. Again, I like Prince Mukamara enough. He's no Peanut Tillman to me. Eddie Jackson is a guy who you really saw have inflated numbers near the end of last year. He had 2 back-to-back 70-yard touchdowns for interceptions for touchdowns. So, again, I believe I even wrote down there he had a 41-point game, a 25-point game, and a 20-point game. And so if you wanted to take those out for average, it is what it is. But other than that, he averaged almost 12 points a game. And that's as a rookie. Oh. So you expect an even better jump the next year. So we're really hoping for this year for him to up with Adrian Amos and really kind of help this linebacking core that has some young pieces, a little bit older pieces that are kind of trying to all mesh together at one time to really kind of solidify and help that backfield.
All right, let's dig into Eddie Jackson. So in the circles that I talk to with IDP guys, Eddie Jackson really isn't brought up a lot. Do you think you can get him at a discount and get some of that same production that you saw last year? I'm not discounting those interception returns because he's got the ability to return them to the house.
I just don't expect that every season.
Right.
Like I never expect guys to have multiple touchdowns in games right in a row.
Right. Do you think you can get one of those?
I think so, and it depends on what they do with special teams because he was originally splitting with Tariq Cohen, but now I think Cohen's kind of taking that role by himself. Yeah. But again, I'm not saying there's no value there either way. And with Amos, he had even a 35 and a 20-point game, and he still missed 6 games, and he still produced I think it was 12, almost 12 and a half a game.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have productive safety play already.
Yeah, Amos is a tackle productive safety, and that's about it. He's not going to be that interception, fumble recovery dude. Eddie Jackson is that big play interception, take it to the house. But at the end of the day, if you take off those touchdowns and interceptions, I think our interceptions are 3 to 5 points, and a touchdown is 6. That's 20 points at the end of the season. That's 2 games where he blew up. Yeah. But you take that away, you still mentioned that he had 12 points a game. And are you willing to take that from a safety deeper? You know what I mean? If you can just count on the tackle numbers, which you think are still going to be there, right?
Yeah, I think he'll still get the tackle numbers this year for sure.
Coming back to my original question, because the people that we talk to IDP-wise, do you think he is a geographical player where people only talk about him up by Chicago? Or do you think that he is highly underrated across the United States?
I think he's underrated across the United States because most of us who talk about the rookies from last year, it's just Adoree Jackson, Byard, and then you kind of like just trail off into some other guys. Yeah, Malik Hooker, stuff like that. And Eddie Jackson just falls down the list, even though he was productive when he came in last year. Mm-hmm. Again, this is going to be a new defensive system, but again, I think safeties still play about the same way in most every system. It just really depends on where they want to put them at. And I think they got some young talent and they're okay with it in the backfield. And I don't know. We'll see how Eddie Jackson does year two. And I know I'll see him at least twice a year. That's for sure.
All right. Where do you want to go to next, Paul?
Let's go to Detroit because they are also have a new defensive coordinator as well. So they're getting a whole new system. So this is going to be an interesting one to see where people land as well.
Their tackle producers were Tahir Whitehead with 110, and he is now gone. Gerard Davis, we expect him to pretty much take over Tahir Whitehead's stats with 96. Glover Quinn with 84. Darius Slay with 60. Quandre Diggs with 55. Tavon Wilson, who was out most of the season, with 55. Ashawn Robinson, a defensive tackle or defensive end? What's he listed as? Ooh, defensive tackle. Yikes, man. 53 total tackles. Nevin Lawson with 47. Ezekiel Ansah with 44. DJ Hayden with 44. Anthony Zettel with 43. Keem Spence with 39. Miles Killebrew 38. Paul Warlow with 30. Goodbye, Paul. Jalen Reeves-Maven with 30. Cornelius Washington with 24. Charles Washington with 14. And Tease Tabor with 14. I don't really see any other guys. Maybe Nick Ballore with 12. But looking at the sack leaders, we've got Ezekiel Ansah with 12. Kind of surprising looking back in retrospect. I didn't think he had that many. Did you?
No, I didn't either.
Another guy is Anthony Zettel with 6.5. We both believe he's highly underrated, not getting talked about enough. And the interception leader with 8 is who? Take a guess.
I'm going to go Diggs.
Darius Slay.
Nah, man.
That's impressive, dude.
For a shutdown cornerback, yeah. It is.
All right. Where do you want to start, Paul?
I don't know. Let's start at the backfield since we mentioned them last. So we'll go on that left side. You got Darius Slay. Backing up him is Jamal Agnew. Then you have the strong safety spot. You have Tavon Wilson. Behind him, Quandre Diggs. At free safety, you have Glover Quinn. Behind him, Charles Washington. And then Tracy Walker behind him. On the right side, you got Nevin Lawson. Behind him, Deshaun Sheed. And then at the corner or nickel spot, you have Jalen Tabor.
Tease.
Okay.
Tease Tabor.
Tease Tabor.
Where did he play? I have a bias against these guys. Florida. All right, this dude.
I think we both have the same bias against Florida.
I hate Florida players. They're always hurt, man.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Tabor, I really love this kid. He's going to be playing what looks like the nickelback role. I think that's a perfect fit for him. He's a Marcus Peters type player. And I mean that, and I beat the table for it. He is a complete steal in IDP leagues.
Okay. You got anything else on the rest of them?
Yeah, I'm not starting Nevin Lawson if I had the opportunity.
Yeah.
As a Detroit Lions cornerback coach, I would try and move Jalen Tease Tabor in. One problem with Tabor is he doesn't have elite speed. He has great instincts, though. A lot like Marcus Peters. So you got him on one side. You got Darius Slay on the other side. You play the nickel with Quandre Diggs. And you got Glover Quinn and Tavon Wilson over the top. These linebackers, there are only two that I really like. And that's the same for almost every team. You know, there's always one guy that you don't like. The defensive line, honestly, is going to create pressure for those D-backs, and they're going to have opportunities to make a lot of interceptions this year, I think. Yeah. I think the Detroit Lions are highly underrated going into the season.
Well, I feel like it's been one of those that we kind of forget how mediocre they were a couple of years ago. I feel like that's gotten backwashed with how bad Cleveland's been.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, this is a team that would go 8-8, and Matt Stafford would throw for 600 yards a game. And then their defense just couldn't keep them in it no matter who they were playing. Even if they had good play from certain people, it would just let them down at the end of the day. I mean, in this backfield, Glover Quinn is a guy who I've seen produce really well. With Tavon Wilson, you had shoulder issues last year. He missed the last 4 games of the season. With Diggs, he was another guy who missed the last 4 games of the season as well. But he did have games that were 13, 24, 22, and 15. So, again, not bad numbers on there. Darius Slay, again, the interception numbers were higher than I thought they were for whatever reason. But, again, he's usually just seen as a shutdown cornerback who can get you the potential pick. I would say kind of a Casey Hayward. I mean, he's a little bit above Casey Hayward right now, but that type of player that can get you those picks and get you those turnarounds or just basically shut down somebody at one time. Moving into the linebackers, we have really at the outside linebacker spot, you got Davion Kennard. Behind him is Jalen Reeves-Maybin. At middle linebacker, of course, you got Jared Davis from Florida. You have behind him Nick Bellor. And then you have Christian Jones coming over from Chicago. He was a guy who I was kind of surprised Detroit signed because they went after him hard to get him as soon as that happened. And Jalen Reeves-Maybin, if I remember correctly. But, I mean, they went after Christian Jones, gave him a 2-year deal with some good hefty money on it. So, I mean, they're going to expect him to bring over those numbers from Chicago. I mean, he did average 11.3 last year, but I do want to notate that with his play in the first 4 games, it was a really slow start. He didn't produce even linebacker 2-3 numbers. And then he hit a big streak during the middle of the season. Then the last 3 games, he cooled down. So, again, you can say that it was just because Chicago is being Chicago, but usually these guys who are solid number ones are going to stay in that same range all the way through. It's just something to notate that he starts cold and then ends his hot streak early. So it's just something I would look forward to, or I'd look at going forward, seeing how he starts.
And a lot of that's play snaps. I did notice that whenever I was looking at that at the end of the season. I like to go back and look at every single team and players that I expected to do well and where their snaps were week to week. We could possibly put that in a draft kit.
Okay.
But actually, we do have something sort of like that. We have the tackle per opportunity stat, which should cover most of that. And I think he's highly rated in his opportunities per tackle.
Now, what do you think about Jalen Reeves-Maybin? My personal opinion is I think that he's a better football player than he is a fantasy football player. And I feel like that's the role that he's in. But I don't know if he'd be a guy I'd ever roster.
My thing is I don't see Christian Jones being a strong side linebacker. And for Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who's an undersized guy, you really need a strong side linebacker who can take that wave like I always talk about on the 3 or the 4-3. So you've got Devin Kennard, who's thick build, strong, and some semi-athletic. I wouldn't say he's an absolute freak, but I would take him against the tight end or the offensive tackle, them coming up and trying to take him out. You put Jalen Reeves-Maybin in there, and you see what we saw from him in Tennessee. He gets blown back. He doesn't have the ability to undercut the offensive linemen as they come up and try and block him out of position. He's very rangy. I would like to see him on the other side of maybe a Christian Jones, but then you're really kind of playing with fire. They don't really have the defensive tackles or the defensive ends to make this happen. Ziggy Ansah's just an edge rusher. Anthony Zettel is more of that run stuffing edge rush. He gets pressure from ancillary pieces because we saw Ashawn Robinson and how he's a wrecking ball last season. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of pieces that have to come into play for Jalen Reeves-Maybin to get on the field. It's that right situation. It's not necessarily a talent issue because I think he's got the talent. I don't think he's really brought it all together, though. And he needs to be showing in practices that he can undercut those offensive linemen and then get out and around or get over and around to that running back who's coming off the edge. I would like to see him develop, and see him starting because I think there's a lot of fantasy points there, especially if a guy like Jared Davis, who is often injured or at least was in college, it would be a tip of the hand to Reeves-Maybin. And coming back to Christian Jones, this guy was highly productive in Chicago. His first season as a rookie, and he hasn't really got a chance to start because they've always favored the tenured players.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, with the John Fox bias that he has, he doesn't like starting the young guys.
He's a Jeff Fisher and a John Fox face mask.
Right.
It's the only difference.
So Christian Jones, I expect him to explode this season. I forgot where I ranked him linebacker-wise, but I need to reassess that. He is definitely a steal just because his numbers seem lower than what he will actually produce. Again, we spoke about Jared Davis and one, his college bias, where he went to college, and two, his injury history. I would not be surprised if he only played 14 out of the 16 games or 12.
Let me throw something out, and I'll see how you want to field it. But what about if Deshaun Hand moves over into a linebacker spot? You think he could, if he could spell some people if something happens?
I don't like that. Like I really don't like that.
Okay. I just want to throw it out there.
It depends. If they would have to be really creative, move Anthony Zettel into a defensive tackle spot and move him to an end and play kind of like a no hand in the dirt pass rush position.
Kind of the bull rush or the elephant rush.
He would have to be on the line.
Yeah.
I don't think he can play outside and cover.
Yeah.
That's just my take on it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because there's another guy on this team, which I guess we can segue into the defensive line, is JoJo Wicker. And that's a guy who probably a lot of people haven't heard of. He was a guy coming out of Arizona State. When we watched tape on him, I think we ranked him 22nd in our DNs. He was listed as a DN, but he played a lot of linebacker snaps.
Yeah.
He wasn't perfect in coverage by any stretch, but I thought he had good instincts. And he's also a guy who's a run stuffer. That's how I even went back and looked at my notes on him. I even put him down as a run stuffer. So, I mean, you're looking at a guy, which we talked about, the strong side linebacker. That's the guy who has to take on that extra block. I don't think this is going to happen, but JoJo Wicker, I think, could be a guy who could be moved around because I don't see him as a defensive tackle. I honestly don't. I mean, I think he'd be more of an end than anything.
Right.
Because I don't think his bull rush is there to be a defensive tackle in this system. I just don't see it unless they can come in and this new coaching staff can really do something that I haven't seen. But JoJo Wicker, I feel, is like a random wild card if he makes the roster. It's a fun fact. It's something that I'd watch. I wouldn't worry about rostering him yet or anything like that. But just from his college tape, I feel like he has some tools there that could be used.
Let's talk about Kerry Hyder.
It's my boy. It's my other boy, yeah. It's weird to have boys on other teams for my divisional rivals. But Kerry Hyder was a guy who most of you have probably forgotten about, to be honest. He was injured all last year. He missed the entire season. They IR'd him. But the year before that, the kid was putting up some really good numbers. He was putting up numbers when Anthony Zettel got hurt. So when he came in, he ended up producing very well. I picked him up, and he actually helped me win several games. Like, he was actually producing DN1 numbers for, I think 5 or 6 games in a row, if I remember correctly, in that span. And that's a guy that I feel like is getting forgotten in this whole defensive line mix. I mean, we want to focus on Anthony Zettel and Ziggy Ansah for, reasons, and Deshaun Hand coming in. But I think Kerry Hyder is a guy who I think is better than Cornelius Washington. And I think him and Zettel are going to be battling for snaps. And I want to put my money on Hyder just because I have personal stake in it. But Anthony Zettel is not going to go away. I mean, Anthony Zettel has proven himself to be a very good commodity sitting there. He's an up and down guy, but he actually led in the defensive snaps last year for Detroit. So that's something you don't want to overlook at the DN spot. I just don't want to forget Hyder because in 2016 he was averaging about 8 points a game. So that's pretty good numbers for what you can get in some of your leagues at the deep position of defensive end. Because I actually believe he was listed as a defensive tackle at the time.
Yeah.
So you're getting that extra point value.
Real quick, do you think Kerry Hyder is one of those waiver wire watch list type of guys, or do you think he's one of those guys that should be rostered in a redraft league?
Oh, redraft, probably waiver. If you're talking dynasty, I'd pick him up. I mean, honestly, I think he's a good enough addition. And if say something doesn't work out and he goes somewhere else, I feel like he's going to be able to fit into a starting role. I really see that from him. I saw it when Zettel was hurt.
Okay.
You just get feelings on guys,
Yeah.
So you also have, again, we talked about Anthony Zettel a little bit. He's on that lefty end spot. Then you have Ashawn Robinson, and behind him is Sylvester Williams. Christian Ringo. I forgot about Christian Ringo. I didn't even know he was still around. At that right defensive tackle spot, you got Jeremiah Ledbetter. I feel so bad. I bet you he got picked on so much in school. He had to have. There's no way. Then you have Toby Johnson backing him up. Is Josh Fadu, is that the one from – no, I'm thinking the dude from, Connecticut. I've got my guys mixed up. Then on that right defensive end spot, of course, you have Ziggy Ansah. Behind him, Deshaun Hand. Ziggy Ansah, like, where do we fall on this guy? Like, he's a guy who we've seen great spurts from, but nothing super consistent.
Yeah. He was consistent at one point. How old is he?
He was drafted in 2013, so he's probably about 26, 27.
I'm going to go with 29. 29.
Okay, I was giving him a few extra years.
When I think of Ziggy Ansah, I think a lot of Robert Quinn. Both these guys have shown that they can be productive, registered at the top of their position, about top 10 in a couple of years, but both of them have had sort of falling outs. A lot of the problems with Robert Quinn, though, was that he was playing in different positions. Ziggy Ansah's problem has been injuries. We've seen how explosive Ziggy Ansah is. He's a freak athlete. I know we throw that out every once in a while, but this guy really is a freak. We haven't seen him develop like we have wanted to. A name that comes to mind is Marcus Davenport. A lot of the same intangibles, same style.
There was one other guy that we talked, the guy from Tulane. Like, I think we compared him exactly to Ziggy, just because they were from the same region. They didn't really have a football background.
Yeah.
I cannot think of his name right now. I'm blanking on it. I can see his video in my head, but there's another kid who got drafted this year that we thought was a Ziggy Ansah, where it's developmental. Like, he needs to be developed into a starting role.
But I think the biggest problem with Ziggy has been consistency. One, being on the field, and two, being dependable to create that high level of fantasy. Do you happen to have the numbers on Ziggy, on how many points he created on average?
I don't think I wrote down the average for Ziggy last year. I think it was just more of the health stuff. But I can look it up real quick. That's not a problem. I got you back.
Should I just go right into the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, I'll read off their tackle numbers. We'll jump back to Ziggy Ansah because I don't think that he was productive week to week. I think he had high numbers.
Ade Aruna, that's the kid from Tulane. I knew it was double A's, but I couldn't put it together.
But going to the Minnesota Vikings, we've got Eric Kendricks with 113 total tackles. Another guy who was highly productive. He wasn't consistent. There would be weeks whenever I would start him and he would burn me. I should have been starting other guys, but again, you want to pair those risks with consistency, and I didn't have enough consistency. I still ended up winning. You have Andrew Sendejo with 80 total tackles, Harrison Smith with 78. That's the middle linebacker and two safeties at the top. Anthony Barr, who's often injured, with 75. Linval Joseph, 68, the defensive tackle. Trey Waynes with 65. Xavier Woods with 56. Everson Griffin with 45. Daniil Hunter with 45. Ben Gideon with 37. Terrence Newman with 35. Tom Johnson with 32. Shamar Stephen with 28. Brian Robinson with 20. Anthony Harris with 18. Mackenzie Alexander with 17. Emmanuel Lemur with 17. The sack leader was Everson Griffin with 13. Number 2 was Daniil Hunter with 7. Interceptions, the most was Harrison Smith. Do you happen to have the stats on Ziggy Ansah?
On Ziggy, he averaged 10.27 last year. What I want to notate is his two biggest games was against New York, which, let's be honest, that was when everyone was calling for the heads of all their offensive linemen. He scored 32 that game. And then his other biggest game was the 16th game of the season, where it really didn't matter. They weren't going to the playoffs. He just produced a lot at that very end.
I would go to assume that he's playing for contract stats.
Yeah, I would guess so too, because he had 3 games where he had 0 points. He had another 4 games under 4 points. So again, besides that, you were just getting, there's 0, 6, 9, 8, 0, 3, 4, 450. So, not anything that's like, what is that, DN2 range? Or would you just go ahead and take the risk that he's going to have a blow-up game?
Well, my thing is, are you ever going to feel comfortable starting him?
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I mean, there might be matchups that I would think, oh, hey, maybe he's going to, hit on this one.
Right. So the defensive line for the Minnesota Vikings is kind of their bread and butter. They've got a great defensive unit as a whole. But you got Danielle Hunter behind him, Brian Robinson, a guy that spells Danielle Hunter quite a bit. If Danielle Hunter does go down, Brian Robinson is one of those guys that I would pick up. I think he's going to play over Jalen Holmes. Again, I am an Ohio State Buckeye fan, but I don't really see Jalen Holmes really transferring to the NFL year one. He had a lot of things that we saw in the Senior Bowl and other games where he needs to clean up. One is pass rush, and two, he needs to become more effective in the run game. By that, we mean shedding blockers. Linval Joseph, one of the most productive defensive tackles in the game right now. My dad was asking me, hey, who's somebody that I could pick up that nobody has? And selfishly, I wanted to pick up Linval Joseph because I went in to look at him. And I was like, Dad, I would draft this dude, He picked him up last year, I believe, in the 8th of 10 rounds in a rookie veteran draft. Why he was dropped, I don't know. Behind him, you've got Curtis Cawthron. Not really expecting much from him. Sheldon Richardson is now on the team as a defensive tackle right next to Linval Joseph. And Ade Aruna was actually picked up behind him.
People who were watching this, I was shaking my head because I was looking. I was like, "Oh, I didn't know. I forgot Ade Aruna was on this team, and now I got to root against him. I'm sorry, I have to now."
But you've got Everson Griffin, the bookend to Danielle Hunter, and you got those two studs on the defensive tackle. That's a nasty defensive line. I think that's way better than what Philadelphia Eagles have, honestly.
Yeah.
I think they're more of a complete team. I expect them to make strides this year.
I mean, talking about that defensive line, I don't mean to cut in. I was looking at their contract situation because I know Sheldon Richardson was part to help with the potential next year of them maybe having to cut people back. Because you look at Linval Joseph, he signed a 6-year, $62 million contract. Then you had I lost my spot. Danielle Hunter, he signed a 6-year, $74 million contract. And then you had, who's the other one I'm missing? Everson Griffin. He signed a 6-year, $75 million contract. You got a lot of money in that defensive line right now. And what that says to me is, what are they going to do when these linebackers hit their end? They're not going
defensive line.
No, I'm talking about their linebackers.
Oh.
It's going to affect how their linebacker money is going to get spent because they have almost $200 million, over $200 million just in the defensive line alone.
Yeah.
And I think Eric Kendricks who's up this year? I know him, and I think Barr's on the end of his rookie year, or his rookie deal.
Kendricks can get that next year, and Barr is up this year.
Yeah, so they're going to have to make some type of deal. Well, yeah, Kendricks he signed a 4-year in 2015, so he is going to be up here very soon. So, again, it's going to be one of those, I don't think they're going to cut any of these guys off that defensive line.
Right.
I don't think they would be that naive to do that. So that's something that, we usually don't talk the real football side, with money-wise. But I felt like that was an important thing to bring up with this defensive line is how much money they have put in and how that's going to affect the future fantasy value of these linebackers.
Right.
Because I feel like it's going to be like an Oakland situation where they're going to try to get the best they can out in free agency and hope that someone sticks, and they're just going to rely on a defensive line.
Right. But I'm comfortable with Brian Robinson and Jalen Holmes. These guys are not elite caliber, but like I said, I loved what I saw from Brian Robinson last year. I think Jalen Holmes, he's got the body. He's got some of the tools. You put him behind Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter and give that a little bit of time to ferment. Mm-hmm. He's going to come out and be a stud for years to come. Yeah. And you just keep rotating your assets. Mm-hmm. And then you can afford to pay those linebackers, especially when these guys aren't starting and they're continuing to produce. You start paying your linebackers and you depreciate your assets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
no, I completely understand that.
Is that what they're doing? I don't know. I don't run the team.
Yeah.
But if that is what they're doing, and it looks like that's the way they've been drafting, They secured both their defensive tackles via free agency. Moving into the linebackers, you've got Anthony Barr, a guy that is often injured, a guy that can produce, but you don't know when he's going to produce. I never feel comfortable starting Anthony Barr.
I hate Anthony Barr.
Why, Paul?
I don't know. There's just certain reasons. We don't talk about the offense in question.
And then behind him, you've got Eric Wilson.
Anthony Barr.
Not really anything promising behind that. You got Eric Kendricks and Kentrell Brothers coming out of K-State University, right up the road from us. Eric Kendricks, again, I talked about how he kind of burned me last year in games that I really needed to win. I would lose by a couple points. I still ended up making the playoffs and winning it all, but I was let down by Eric Kendricks multiple games. Ben Gideon, who's a stud. I'm not like, oh my gosh, Ben Gideon, I have to go get that dude,
Yeah.
But he's a better football player than an IDP player.
I mean, honestly, I think the main fantasy points are spread out in the defensive line and the secondary in this team, and it's one of those linebackers are just the overlooked piece of the pie. They get the smallest share sometimes. Like they do produce some sacks, and so they have that value. But I mean, you see more points go out to that secondary and defensive line.
Well, I think you're talking about per position wise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Eric Kendricks is one of the better linebackers in the NFL.
Yeah.
Anthony Barr is a good to decent linebacker. His biggest problem is he doesn't string together these high tackle numbers that we'd like to see from an IDP producer.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a good football player.
Yeah, I agree.
These defensive backs, I think they get a lot of that benefit because of this investment in the defensive line and that pressure that it creates.
So much money, man. It's crazy how much money's in there.
And moving right into the D-backs, we've seen Trey Waynes kind of come into his own.
I was listening to just another random sports show, and they're talking about, how is Trey Waynes still playing in the NFL? Because they're talking about how he gets thrown at so much. But I'm like, well, who else do you throw at?
Right.
You don't throw at Xavier Rhodes closed.
Yeah.
You don't throw at him. You don't really want to take a risk on Harrison Smith half the time either when he's not hurt.
Right.
So, I mean, he's a guy who he gets that benefit of getting that many targets. And he was a good producer last year, making a playoff push.
Yeah.
I tried to trade for him once.
Right. The other day in the gym, I was admiring him whenever they were playing the Eagles. He was shutting dudes down, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that has always been one of his biggest problems was he was drafted in the first round, expected to make a big splash, and never really made that splash.
Kind of like a Varnon Hargraves?
Yeah.
Deal?
But I think he had a lot of the same problems, but we're just now starting to see him develop. What's really interesting is their push for Mike Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of an indication of, hey, Trey Waynes, we don't know if you really got it together, because they're pleasantly surprised with Xavier Rhodes.
Yeah, because most people honestly expected them to take an offensive lineman in the first round. That's kind of what they projected all over. I mean, they did get Brian O'Neill in the second round, but that's what they were originally looking at for when they picked Mike Hughes. A lot of Minnesota fans that I know were like, well, what are we taking a cornerback for?
Right. That also being said, last year they took, or 2 years ago, they took Mackenzie Alexander in the second round. So Trey Waynes better get his stuff together. 100%. He better lock it down, or else he's going to end up being cut next year.
Yeah, and I think Mike Hughes is going to make an impact on special teams enough. I feel like he's going to get some shots and some snaps. I feel like because Vikings actually play their rookies quite often, they're kind of the opposite of the Bengals. They rotate guys in. Mike Zimmer is not afraid to rotate guys in when he feels like it's right. Another guy that I want to mention in this backfield. Did we mention all the positions yet, or did we kind of stop at Trey Waynes?
Well, we mentioned Xavier Rhodes. He is one of those guys that doesn't necessarily get you a lot of fantasy points, just because he doesn't get thrown to. Mm-hmm. You've got Terrence Newman as well, who's long in the tooth, a lot like Jonathan Joseph, really in the twilight years of their career. Again, it's kind of a nod to Mike Hughes, Mackenzie Alexander, and the other cornerbacks that they have drafted in years past. He's been such a stud for them, but he's losing a step. I believe he's 33.
I think so, yeah. He's been playing a long time.
Right. Andrew Sandejo. This guy is a must-have. I would rather have him over Harrison Smith because of the price that you're going to pay to get Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith, a stud out of, I believe, Notre Dame. We've been watching him ever since he came into the league. I believe that's about the time whenever we started playing together.
Yeah.
2012.
Yeah. 39. Terrence Newman's 39.
Are you serious?
Yes. I had to double check myself because I'm like, I don't think that's right.
Yo, you know what he wears for deodorant? Embalming fluid.
Probably. The sad thing is I still remember him playing at K-State when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like I was little when he was playing at K-State.
Right. You're probably 2 when you were watching him play at
Right.
K-State.
The first time I ever watched television, Terrence Newman was on TV. Oh, man.
But Andrew Sandejo, a guy that comes up, fills the hole, what you expect from a strong safety. Really, from where he was drafted or where he was picked up and created a role for himself, the dude's been an absolute beast. Harrison Smith, who is injured quite a bit, I shy away from him. I traded out of him in a dynasty league because I was getting tired of him not being there when I needed him. Needless to say, I believe I ended up trading Harrison Smith and a couple draft picks for Amari Cooper, and I was kicking myself because Amari Cooper sucked last year, and Harrison Smith goes off.
Yeah.
So that's one of those trades where I ended up losing. You have to bring those up because whenever you win so many trades, people don't accept it.
So, and you notice that I've mentioned throughout this podcast so far that there have been players that have been taken by division rivals that I like and now I have to root against. Well, Holton Hill's another guy who I loved in the draft process. I was pounding the table for this kid's talent because I saw it. And I'm usually a person who doesn't like guys with red flag issues. But what I saw on his tape changed my mind. And I was like, I got to know why this kid did what he did and why he came out early. The reason he was not drafted in the draft is because he came out early. Because he was probably not going to be able to start at Texas. And so he didn't want to have to sit out a year, go play somewhere else, and then try to go to the NFL 2 years later. So he decided to go ahead and cut and go to the NFL. He just got suspended. I think it was one of them was academic issues. And then another was just, I think, a disagreement from a coach, I believe, if I remember correctly. But Holton Hill out of Texas, the dude's got the cornerback body. He's 6'3". He's solid. I think this kid could easily play his way up in maybe not with the Vikings down the road, but this guy could play his way into a starting role someday. I see the talent there. And I usually don't get excited about cornerbacks, but this dude jumped off the tape to me. And I'll probably still pound the table for him, not as hard because he's a Viking now, but I will pound the table because I think that kid has the talent.
Right.
I really see it. And you know how I am with red flag issues and how I don't like them. But this kid, I feel I can play way above it.
Oh.
I love Holton Hill, man. I think he's good. I think he would have been a second or third round talent if he wouldn't have gotten these disciplinary issues and come out next year.
Mm-hmm. You got anything else on the Vikings?
No, that's good. I finished on a positive note with the Vikings, so that's pretty good.
Right. Green Bay Packers. The tackle leader was Blake Martinez with 144 tackles. And the next closest guy was Jake Ryan with 81. HaHa Clinton Dix, 79. Josh Jones with 71. Morgan Burnett, who's gone, with 68. Kenny Clark with 55. Mike Daniels, 49. Demarius Randall, who's also gone, with 47. Devon House with 44. Clay Matthews, 44. Nick Perry, 38. Josh Hawkins, 37. Dean Lowry, 32. Kyler Fackrell with 28. Kevin King with 28. Marvin Evans with 24. Kentrell Bryce with 23. Really, that's about all the noteworthy ones. Sack leader was Clay Matthews with 8.5. Nick Perry with 7. Next highest was Mike Daniels with 5. Interception leader was Demarius Randall with 4 and HaHa with 3. Everybody else had 1 or less.
Mm-hmm.
It's your team, Paul. Go ahead and take it, bro.
All right. We'll start with the defensive line. We'll work our way down. You have Muhammad Wilkerson coming over from the Jets. He's going to be playing that left defensive end spot. You got Dean Lowry behind him. At nose tackle, you got Kenny Clark. Behind him, James Looney, who Green Bay drafted last year at their last draft pick. That defensive tackle spot, you have Mike Daniels. Behind him, Montavious Adams. Everything with this defensive line, I feel like Green Bay has depth here now. Again, hopefully no one gets injured because, we get the injury bug like no other team. I am not as high on Muhammad Wilkerson as everyone else is. I don't know. I feel like we're living on that name cachet of what he did with the Jets. I see him being more of a team tackle guy more than an individual star. Because honestly, if any guy's going to get the most tackles off this defensive line, for me, it's going to be Mike Daniels. I love this dude on and off the field. He's one of the funnier guys. If you ever want to follow him on Twitter, he's got great stuff. But this guy is a guy who gives 110% and gives that motor. And I've seen it time again where he would push it. The first game of the season last year against Seattle, he was destroying that offensive line by himself, and he was getting back in that backfield. Again, he's a high-low guy, so you got to take that in consideration for your points-wise. But Mike Daniels is a solid football player.
By high-low, you mean inconsistent?
Yeah, because, again, it's a rotational. Green Bay, with Dom Capers' system, he played to who the opponent was. Again, we're getting a whole new defensive coordinator, so this is a whole new experiment here. So I can't tell you for sure what I see until I start watching it, which, I got all the stuff, and I watched that obviously more than anything else. One guy I'm super excited about is Montavious Adams, who we didn't even get to see play last year. 3rd-round pick out of Auburn. He's a guy who was a little heavier. He's trimmed down a little bit. I'm excited to see where he rotates in here. I think he had a lot of good talent. A guy that honestly I thought we overdrafted, but when I went back and looked at tape of him, I could understand why he was in the 3rd round when he was there. I think he has decent talent.
Absolutely love this dude coming out. I think he's more of a nose tackle. Mm-hmm. Him playing as a defensive tackle on the end. I kind of be interested to see. Again, you mentioned that he had lost weight. I want to see how this translates to the NFL. He's going to be one of those guys that I'm going to be watching in preseason. Again, we talk about the rotation. Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark. Where's he going to fit into the system, especially whenever they spend a 7th-round draft pick on James Looney? I always look at the nod to what they see in other players and why they decided to take that draft pick where they took it.
Yeah, and if you're looking for dynasty, Kenny Clark's a great ad. He's only 22 years old. He's already been in the league 2 years. This is a guy who has only had really one injury, and he had an ankle tweak. Nothing major. He only missed, I think, three or 4 games. I think 3 games. But again, Kenny Clark, I feel like is a good defense or a good nose tackle to have if you're going to be playing in that, the 2 spot, depending on what you need for defensive tackle. But it's the value of age. He got drafted when he was 20 years old, so you're going to have that value there. I picked him up in ours. That's because I saw his talent at UCLA when he was so young. I felt like he could develop into a good player. I feel like I'm hoping this year is the year that he really comes in because he was playing great last year. I really thought he was putting up numbers. May not have been fantasy number 1 numbers, but he was playing very consistently.
Go ahead and jump in the linebackers.
All right.
That's your team, man.
All right. With the linebackers, you got the left side, you got Clay Matthews. Behind him, Vince Bile. I don't really want to get in the other ones. At the left inside linebacker right now, they have Jake Ryan, Ahmad Thomas behind him, Kendall Doranson behind him. He was the other 7th-round pick this last year. At middle linebacker, you have Blake Martinez. Behind him, Oren Burks. At the right side, you have Nick Perry, and then you have Kyle Frackrell behind him. Interesting ones with this is I'm really excited to see what Vince is able to do. Again, he didn't play last year. He was hurt. Former 4th-round pick, Wisconsin's own. So there's always something about when you're watching the guy you watched in college play for your team as well. And people in Green Bay love this guy. We would have loved to have TJ Watt. Don't get us wrong. Should have had TJ Watt, but I think Vince has a good skill set to honestly. I feel like he could play in Jake Ryan's role a little more. I don't know if he's going to be that elite pass rusher, but with Clay's injury history, if he can stay healthy, he's going to get playing time. Clay is a guy now who I always expect to have a hurt groin. he already broke his nose, and it's not even the season yet. So, he took a liner to the face in case no one knows about that, took a softball to the face. But Clay Matthews, besides last year having, 8.5 sacks, I think is what we said, I don't know where the value is for Clay Matthews anymore.
You know what I'd like to see your Packers do? I'd like to see them move Clay Matthews and Nick Perry to one linebacker spot on the outside and just send waves. One rushes, the other one comes in, or 2 downs, 1 down, 2 downs, 1 down.
Just kind
rotate
of
those guys.
wear that side down.
Right. And then you can swap them back and forth. And then you have Warren Burks on the other side with Blake Martinez and Jake Ryan.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about Warren Burks, a guy who I don't think we hit as hard in our linebacker one. I mean, we did talk about him, but I mean, I didn't expect him to go to Green Bay, to be completely honest, especially with the 3rd-round pick.
Let's save some of that for the premium podcast.
That's fine. But I really like Warren Burks. I think I went back and had to watch more film just because I like to dive into our draft picks. But I feel like this guy could play middle or outside. I think he has a good coverage that he could end up covering if he has to. I think with the new system, they're going to rely more on the cornerbacks to deal with that besides Dom Capers' system, which was send a guy here, send a guy there, send a guy over here, and try to blitz them from all those different sides. I feel like this is going to be more contained, but still a stronger defense. So, I mean, he's a guy who could easily, I think, fit in about anywhere. I mean, he's slated as a middle. I mean, you have Blake, who was a guy who I pounded the table for last year, saying, I see a linebacker there, and he blew up and had a really good year. So I'm hoping for more success there as well. Jake Ryan, I don't know. We're going to the last year of the contract. I don't know what we're going to see. I liked him when he came out of college at Michigan, but I haven't really liked him since that well. I feel like he's just a guy who's plugged in and out. So that's where I can see Warren Burks starting to get some work, is in that middle linebacker spot next to Blake on the inside. Got nothing?
I think they're going to use Warren Burks as a heat-seeking missile throughout the middle. They're going to probably take out Jake Ryan and blitz him in blitz packages.
Yeah.
Imagine, again, I mentioned one aspect, but if they do this as well, I wouldn't be surprised. Clay Matthews on one end, you have Nick Perry on the other, and Warren Burks down the middle. You got Blake Martinez playing the middle of the field as that happens.
Mm-hmm. And, I don't know much about Mike Pettine. I had to go back and look at his old defenses because I'm still figuring out exactly what we're going to do. That's kind of what I like. It's like when you get a new shock to the system. You got to pump something in, just see what happens because you're used to Dom Capers for the last 8-9 years. So you kind of knew what to expect every time. All right, so we'll go into the secondary, which has been the weak spot for quite a while. I don't think anyone can deny that just because of injuries is just a killer. So you have on this left side cornerback spot right now, they have Tremont Williams, who's coming back, went to Arizona, also went to Cleveland. Behind him, you have Josh Jackson, who they drafted in the 2nd round from Iowa. Then you have Quentin Rollins, former 2nd-round pick behind him. At strong safety, they put in Josh Jones. Behind him, Jermaine Whitehead, and then Raven Greeny. Then you have at free safety, you have Clinton Ha-Ha-Dix, and then Quintrell Bryce. And then on the right side, they have Kevin King and Josh Hawkins behind him, and then Davon House, who they brought back over. He was originally drafted by the Packers, went to Jacksonville, and then came back. And then right now in the nickelback spot, they have Jair Alexander slated, who was the 1st-round pick this last year. Honestly, I feel like he's got that value there, and he'll continue to have value. Josh Jones, I love the kid's play from last year. I thought he played in great spots.
Agreed.
I don't know what you would want to spend to go get him. I feel like there's a lot of hype, at least, again, knowing Packer fans that talk to him all the time. I feel like there's a lot of hype behind him, but I don't know if we're going to see the numbers that we expect to boom. We expect him to jump right into Burnett's numbers. And I don't know if that happens with all the movement around in the backfield.
Would you still be okay with 75% of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, we used to, again, different system, but they used to blitz the safeties all the time.
Right.
I don't know if Patine's going to do that, if he's going to continue that system.
Not only that, but if you get those shutdown corners, Kevin King and Josh Jackson on the edge, and you got Jair Alexander running the nickel, it's going to open up space, and he's going to get tested a lot.
I just want everyone to be healthy. I just want 1 year of healthy cornerbacks. Going out and going double cornerback, which we've done twice now. We did that with Randall and Quentin Rollins. We did them back-to-back as well. So I think Jair has great explosiveness, and he's very agile. He's got a lot of –
He's a true nickel.
Yeah, he's a true nickel. He's got a lot of bursts and stuff. Josh Jackson is that guy who I think will be hopefully the next Sam Shields on this team, the guy who can shut it down and also get turnovers. He was a turnover monster at Iowa. We had to watch both our teams play him multiple times and get pick sixes.
Back-to-back weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it had 2 touchdowns in both games.
Yeah, we beat Iowa, but Josh Jackson was the one who scored all the points for Iowa. Yeah, and it was crazy. I wanted Josh Jackson to get drafted in the first round if we were going to go cornerback. Once we traded down, that's who I wanted. But we ended up getting them both, so I can't complain too much. But I want to see what Kevin King's going to do. You know, he was a guy, again, he got banged up and had some issues really rotating in last year. I want to see what Patine's got for him. I think, you know, again, the secondary, I don't know fantasy value points, what you're going to get so far besides the safeties. But it's just something to watch. You know, it's a lot of moving parts right now.
Kevin King out of Iowa? Or
Washington. Yep.
I'm thinking of the other King.
Desmond King.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love when something new happens. You know, I'm not a crazy person, but I'm expecting a lot more development from just stay healthy. That's all you want.
All right. We've got our draft kit on sale. It's $10. You can go find it at the store, idpfantasyempire.com. It's going to be the store tab. You can find our premium podcast, idpfantasyempire.com. Go to the subscribe button. $5, you get it for 12 months. It covers all of the rookies of this season, every single player in every single position. What else do we have out there? You can find our Twitter at IDP Empire.
Hit us up with reviews. We love reviews. We love hearing from you guys. You know, we don't hear from people that, you know, all the time. We want to get those emails going back and forth because there's always great suggestions. Right. You know, we're always open to those. Love them. Right.
We've been pretty successful with the draft kit so far. We expect that to pick up as we get closer to the season. Again, we've got the premium podcast so we're going to be rolling out with the X's and O's. That's going to be in the next week or two.
Yeah, because we're going to be trying to give you those tools where you can take the draft kit and apply it to that premium podcast and be like, okay, I see why that guy fits and why he should be a number 1 or a number 2. So that's what we're trying to connect that. We're trying to get you a deeper knowledge of this football game besides just seeing a name and drafting them.
Right. And I think we talk about more topical issues in this regular weekly podcast, whereas we like digging deeper. And that really requires people. It's one of those things that people invest in something, then they're more willing to listen to the information that we're giving out. We don't want to scare people away talking deep football, you know, X's and O's and what the 3-4 offers, what the 4-3 offers, how these positions are going to line up and how players typically benefit from being in these positions. What else? We have our email, idpfantasyfootball@gmail.com.
I think it's idpfantasyempire@gmail.
Yeah.
At gmail.com.
Correct.
But yeah, again, hit us up. And we're on Podbeam. So if you're on Podbeam, hit us up on there too. So we'd love hearing from you guys. So as always, start building your empire today.
Love you, Mom.